Corporate Finance Excel practice problem. We'll be using the future value calculation to help ask and answer the question of how long it would take for an investment to double or triple. Don't leave profits solely to chance. Instead, use corporate finance. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. If you have access to the Excel worksheet and would like to follow along, note we are in the practice tab as opposed to the example tab. The example tab in essence being an answer key. We're going to have our information up top. We're going to put that information into the blue area on the right-hand side, doing this a few different ways. One, basically with a mathematical formula, then basically with a table that's going to be increasing. That's going to be like a running balance table, then with an Excel formula, and finally with the future value tables. Going back to the left, questions formatted a little bit differently for our future value calculation, that being how long does it take for an investment to double and triple. So we're going to be doing both of those. How long does it take to double or triple? Normally in practice, we would probably have a set investment amount. Possibly we're thinking about investing and thinking, well, how long would it take for this thing to double? And we don't really need the amount to basically, ask the question. We just need basically to ask the question, is it going to be double? And we can basically assign an amount. That's kind of the tricky part of this. So if we took our future value calculation, we're trying to say where would we be in the future. So we're going to have a future value of one calculation because we're imagining we put something in one time now and see how long it would take for it to double. So the future value would be the present value times 1 plus r to the n. We can do this, of course, algebraically. We know what 1 is. We know what r is. We're going to say it's 6% in our practice problem. And the n is what we want to be the unknown. That's the time that we would like to be unknown. So what we would want to do then is assign the present value. And you could assign the present value whatever you want it to be and then double it. So it could be 1, and then you expect the answer then for the future value to be 2. And if you do that, then the only unknown would be n. In other words, once again, we would assign the present value to some number such as 1, or we'll use 1,000. You might say the present value is 1,000. Therefore, the future value would be 2,000. So you would have 2,000 equals 1,000 times 1 plus r, which would be 6% to the n then being the unknown. Now, we won't do it here algebraically. We'll do it with the goal seek type of feature within Excel, because I think that's a useful way to do it in practice, and that's a really good tool to get an idea with. So we'll kind of back into it with the goal seek first, and then we'll use the goal seek with the formula, which is probably the most likely way to use it in practice in Excel. So notice if we have this calculation in a mathematical formula, if we break this calculation down into our table we saw in prior presentations, this would be the unknown. We wouldn't know it. We'd have to assign a value to the present value. So we're going to assign that to be the $1,000. 1,000 there. And then we're going to have the inner column as we did in prior presentations, 1 plus r. So I'm going to say 1 plus the rate is going to be 6%, 0.06. Going to make this a percent. Well, let's actually say this is going to be equal that 6%. And then percentify this, home tab, numbers, we'll percentify it, underline it, home tab, font group, and underline it. Sum it up equals the sum of those two items. We'll percentivize this, home tab, numbers, percentify. So now we're at 106%. Now the unknown here is going to be n. We don't know what that is. To use the goal seek, I'm just going to pick a number randomly. So let's just say we hit 5 for that number, and that's the one we're basically going to change, but we're going to do that with a trial and error type of format with the tool of goal seek. So then I'm going to go down here and say this is going to be equal to the 106 to the power of shift 6, that 5, which is basically a made up number. Home tab, numbers, add some decimals here. Let's go ahead and underline it, home tab, font group, and underline. And then we can do our multiplication, which would be the 1,000 times that amount. So there we have it. Now this amount, we know this amount needs to be 2,000 because that's our other known. If this is 1,000, we want this to be 2,000, and we want to change this number to be whatever it needs to be to get to that 2,000. So we could just start to change this in a trial and error format, say 6, 7, and so on. It's getting closer to 2,000. Or we can have Excel do that with a tool called Goal Seek. To do it, you put your cursor somewhere other than the cell you want to change. And then we're going to go up to the data up top, the forecast tool, and what if, and we want to use the Goal Seek analysis. So this is not an actual formula that we're going to be putting in place. It's just going to basically do a trial and error format just like we were doing a second ago. We're going to take the cell, we want to take this cell, and we want to make it be 2000 because we know what the end result would be. And we want to do that by changing this cell. So we're telling Excel, once again, we want this cell to be 2000, this cell to be 2000, hard-coded the 2000 by changing this factor. That's the unknown. So then we're going to say, okay. And then it does it for us, right? So then it fixes it, and we'll say, okay. So it's 12. Let's add some decimals. Make it a little bit. So 11.9 about. So note, in that format, by using that format, you can basically use one formula that we know, this being the future value formula, and then instead of algebraically, changing it to the other unknown, basically using goal seek to find that unknown. And that's useful when you're using complex function or formulas within Excel as well, which we'll take a look at shortly, so you don't have to memorize different formulas. I don't need to basically memorize a different formula. I can use goal seek to kind of back into the number. So let's try that this way. Let's think about it. Well, what if we kind of figured it out in a table type of format, and then we could just add up until we get to 2000. In other words, if we start off with 1000 here, we could say we have our running balance table, or we just made up 1000. We'll start off with a 1000. Now I just want to do a running balance until I get to 2000, which in Excel is possible to do. So we can then say, all right, let's take that 1000 times the 6%. And then that's going to be $60 about. We'll take it will be $60. The 1000 plus the 60, that's our new balance. Hold on a sec. The 1000 plus the 60, there's our new balance. Let's do it again. We're going to say the 1060 times the 6%. Now we've got the 64. We're going to say this is what we had before plus the new balance. We've done this in the past. I'm doing this a little bit more quickly. And then we're going to do it again. We're going to say this is going to be the 1123.6 times the 6%. And once again, this is what we had last time plus the current change, so that we have it again. We can autofill this down. To do so, however, we need to make this cell, that 6%, absolute. I don't want it to move when we do the copying down. So I'm going to double click here. That cell is E5. So this cell E5, we need to make an absolute reference. I'm going to do that by selecting F4 on the keyboard, or you could put a $sign before the E and the 5. You only need a mixed reference, but I just use an absolute one anyways, because it's, it'll work. So let's go ahead and select those two and then copy them down. I'm going to copy them down. And what we would do is just copy them down until we get, close to 2000, right? I'm going to copy it down. And if I go to 12 here, we could see that from 11 to 12, it cleared that 2000 mark. So we know it's between 11 and 12 in that case. And you could even break it down further in this kind of running balance type of method to figure this out. You could say, okay, well, it's going to be after, 11 periods, 11 years in this case. Let's break the 11 down to months. So months here. And let's take this 14%, or this 114 that's going to be in year 12 that went over by 12. And let's just divide it by 12 months. All right. So I'm going to say this 114 divided by 12 would be 949. So if we took this 189830 plus the 949, and then we keep on copying down to get close to, once again, the 2000. But then if I copy this down, this will be the same thing all the way down for the 12 months. So all the way down, and then I can copy this down and say this is going to be equal to the prior balance plus this change, and basically copy that down until we get past that 2000 mark. So it's somewhere between 11 and 10 months, 11 years and 10 months, and 11 and 11 months, which is about 11.9 of the time period. Let's do it again. Let's do it this time with an Excel formula. And once again, here, note what I know here is I know the future value of one calculation for Excel. So what I would like to do is use that formula. I don't want to have to make up another formula in Excel in order to solve for n. There might be a function to do that, but I'd rather just use the function that I know, because then I can do that easily. So what I'd like to do is make up an n first, and then use goal seek to back into it instead of doing the algebra to figure it out. But here, because notice you could see the algebra here, but if I was to do this with a function like Excel, I can't I can't see the algebra. So what I'd like to do is basically say, all right, let's make this a 5 here. That's my estimate. And then I'm just going to use the formula I know, which is a future value formula. And then this is going to be the rate, which is going to be the 6%, comma, the number of periods, which we said was, or we made it up to be 5 here, which so we just made that up, and then comma, and then we don't have a payment because it's not an annuity, so another comma, and then the amount we're going to say is 1,000. So we just made up this 5 so that I can put this into my future value formula, and I'm going to say enter. I'm going to make it a positive, double-clicking on it, and put in a negative before the F. Now, again, I could change this. I know that needs to be 2,000, so when that's 2,000, then my time is correct. So I could then say, well, let's make this a 6, let's make this a 7, and so on and so forth, or we can use the goal seek now to do this. So notice I can use this function. I can't really use my algebra with a future value function because I don't see the algebra here. I'd need another function to solve for the time. But again, I can use this function and then solve for by adjusting this cell, which the function is using goal seek. So let's do that. We're going to go then we need to be off the cell here that we're going to be dealing with, and we're going to go to the formulas up top. The data up top. And then we want to go to the forecast and goal seek. Goal seek, we're seeking a goal here. And the goal is to set this cell to be 2,000. And we want to set it to be 2,000 by changing this cell. So we're going to change this cell to whatever it needs to be. Just use trial and error in order to figure out what it needs to be to make that cell what we know it needs to be, 2,000. So we'll say okay. And there it does it. Amazing. So now that's one way we can use the same function. You probably won't see that on a test question, but that tool in practice, very useful tool to be able to see that you can use that future value tool to basically solve for an unknown other than, the future value. Okay, let's do it with the tables. You can kind of approximate with the tables. So you can do an approximation with the table. So let's imagine we have the 1,000 again, and I know that I need to be getting to 2,000 here, right? I know the end result is 2,000 because it needs to double. Well, that means I can figure out what the amount I would expect to find on the table would be, which would be the 1,000 over the 2,000, which means, it's going to be equal to the 2,000 over the 1,000, which would be 2, obviously, because we doubled it. So that means let's go find that 2 on the table. So I can go over here and say, well, at 6%, here's the 6%. I need to find it getting to 2, which is somewhere between 11 and 12, right? Somewhere between 11 and 12. So you can kind of approximate from the table and say, well, from the table, that happens between 11 and 12 somewhere. And then you can come up with some kind of approximation of how close to 11 or 12 to get possibly from there. Let's do it again. Let's say, well, what if it tripled? Same kind of idea. What if it tripled now? Well, now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use my formula, and I'm going to say, okay, present value times 1 plus r to the n. I know what r is. It's going to be 6. And then I'm just going to plug in a number for the present value, which I'm just going to say is 1,000. And that means that the future value needs to double, which would make it 2,000. Therefore, the only unknown is n. So you can solve for it algebraically that way. We're going to use our goal seek in Excel to now figure it out here. We're going to say, well, what if this is 1,000 now? And we need it to be basically the 2,000. So I'm plugging in the 1,000. Let's do our same kind of calculation. It's going to be 1. The rate is going to be the 6%. And then I'm going to percentify that. Home tab, numbers, percentify, underline it. Home tab, font, underline, add it using the sum function equals the SUM of those items. Percentify it. Home tab, numbers, percentify. The unknown here then being n, I'm just going to make up a number. We make up 5 as our number. And then I'll underline that home tab font and underline. Then we would take this to the power of that n. This is going to be the 106 shift 6 to the caret of 5. Adding decimals, home tab, number, add some decimals there. Underline, home tab, font, underline. And then we can multiply this out. This is going to be equal to the 1,000 times this, and we get that number. Now, I know what that needs to be. It needs to be 3,000. And this is the thing I need to change to get it to be 3,000. So in a similar way as we saw with the function, Excel function, I could just use goal seek to do trial and error. I could do trial and error myself. I could say, what if I put a 6? What if I put a 7? What if I put a 10? And do that myself. But I can use goal seek to do that. I'm going to be off the cell I want to use. To do it, I'm going to go to the formulas or the data up top, then the forecast, what if, goal seek. We want this cell to be 3,000, hard coding the 3,000 by changing this cell, and then just let it do the trial and error itself, and then around 19. So I'm going to say, okay, let's add some decimals to be more exact. Home tab, numbers, 18.85 about. So there's one method we can use that. Now, more likely in practice, you would do this method. You would do this like if you knew this formula, you could do the algebra to kind of do your algebra to figure out for n. But you can use this trial and error method there as well. But that gives you a good idea of how you would use that trial and error, which is more likely to happen if you're using like a function, which is quite common. So we know the function for the future value. I can't use the function unless I plug in something for the number of periods. So I'm going to plug in 5, and then we're going to use that to change once again. So I'm going to say this is going to be equal to the future value, and we're going to select that item. The rate is going to be the 6%. So 6%, comma, 6%, comma. And then we're going to say the number of periods is now going to be, we don't know it, we've just estimated 5, comma, comma. And then the present value we said was this 1,000, which we made up so that we can know the end value should be 3,000, and then close it up. I'm going to put a negative before the first item to flip the sign. So we'll put a negative there to make it a positive number, multiplying times -1. Now I could once again change this. I could say I know that needs to be 3,000. So like if I made this like 10, if I made it like 15, and so on and so forth to get to that to 3,000, or I could just ask Excel to do that by once again going to the data up top, forecast, what if analysis, goal seek, set this cell to be 3,000 by changing this cell, and it'll just do it trial and error just like we were doing 1885 about. So that's another method we can use, quite common in practice, not so much for practice problems, but you could use that for a practice problem in the mathematical formula format as well, but useful in practice. Then we're going to do it again. Let's say this amount's going to be 1,000. The end amount's going to be 3,000. So what amount needs to be from the table? Well, it's going to be 3,000 divided by 1,000, or 3. So let's go find that 3 on the table. So we'd say, okay, at 6%, we're looking for something that goes to 3 about. So that happens sometime between 18 and 19. So we can at least get to there. We could say, well, at some point between 18 and 19, that happens. And then we could try to figure out possibly closer to 18.85 once we get close there. So there's a few different methods that you can use this future value formula to get to basically a different unknown.